One Oli here, and this is my review of Inferno, the fourth and final story of the seventh season of classic Doctor Who, starring John Pertwee as the third Doctor. Inferno is the 54th story overall. It's 7 episodes long and is written by Don Houghton. This is also the last Doctor Who classic Who story to have 7 parts. So the plot of the Inferno is as follows. Inferno is a top secret project that involves drilling down into the Earth's crust to unleash a new energy source. However, the Doctor, along with his assistant Liz Shaw, is concerned that this drilling will have disastrous consequences for the whole world. His concerns are soon confirmed when the TARDIS throws him into a dangerous parallel universe, where Project Inferno is almost complete and the end of the world is near. So that is the plot of Inferno. So, what I think of Inferno? What an amazing story. It's truly iconic and is hands down one of the best Doctor Who stories ever made. And I also have a mate who I befriended during the first lockdown, and even slightly before that. He also co-runs the account Uncle Doctor Humor. His name is Heather Khan, so I made friends with him and his other mates as well during the first lockdown. And this is actually his favorite Doctor Who story ever, and I can see why. And it's a wonderful story, and I'll give him a shout out, and I'll put his Doctor Humor account in the link in the description. The production of the story is really good. Even the sets were brilliant, even though it was the basic research center and the hangar where the TARDIS was. But it was still good, and it was pretty much the same for the alternative parallel universe as well. And there was a bit of location filming, especially when the Doctor was on Bessie trying to escape from the parallel universe troops, and I think that a bit of location filming was used there, and the script was brilliant, and this story gave us a lot of incredible dialogue, which I'll mention later on in the review. By Douglas Camfield was brilliant, and as we already know, Douglas Camfield is an incredible director, so if you see a story that Douglas Camfield is directing, you are definitely bound to see some good stuff. Stuff such as the scene where the Doctor was arriving on Earth in the parallel universe trying to escape from the brigade leader's men, and as I actually mentioned that scene a little bit earlier on as well. It also had some great visuals in this story, such as the bit in episode 1 where the Doctor ended up in that time vortex that was leading into the parallel Earth, and then with the trippy visuals of the Doctor's face just like and Pertwee pulling out for that facial expressions. It was actually quite funny, and I also liked the scene where Platoon Leader Benton, that's Sergeant Benton's parallel universe self, was turning into a prime void. That was some very good visuals, and it was quite scary as well. And I also like the closing moments of episode 6 when the Doctor was successfully able to escape from the alternative universe, but then he had to leave the others behind, and then they all noticed the bit lava that was just coming towards them, coming to kill them, and there was nothing that they could have done to escape because they all eventually died. That scene itself was quite tragic and scary, but at the same time, the visuals was just incredible. And this is also the last time we get to see the episode title card, where I had the name, story name, the writer, and the episode number. And showing there was some stock footage of lava, but that stock footage was actually used in The Enemy of the World. But it was still pretty cool to say the least. I also like the originality of this story and the plot, and this is actually the first time that Doctor Who actually addresses the topic of parallel universes and parallel Earths. And I don't think there's ever been a time in classic Who that was actually addressed, but in New Who this was addressed quite a few times, such as the Cybermen that actually came from John Lumick's Earth. That's the parallel Earth on their side in series 2. And this story was actually quite tense as well, and we had some tense moments such as the brigade leader and Liz, section leader Liz Shaw. They were interrogating the Doctor with that lamp. But it was quite common in other forms of media, but it was still a good scene to watch. And obviously, when the Doctor was being held at gunpoint by Stallman's parallel universe self, I think it was episode 4. And obviously, when the Doctor was in the episode 6 cliffhanger, as I mentioned before, that was quite tense as well. And obviously, the Prime Voids running around didn't help things at all. Other than the intensity of the story, it had some great moments. such as that scene of the Doctor in episode 1 in the time vortex. The Doctor talking to the brigade leader after arriving on the parallel Earth, when him and the brigade leader were talking about how the Doctor knew the warrior family, but they were all dead, and how the brigade leader was like, "You don't exist on this Earth. If you don't exist, then you won't feel the bullets we're going to use to shoot you with." And that was a very cold scene, and Nicholas Courtney there said that line very well, and that was really good. And it was a very interesting conversation to say the least. And obviously, we had the bit in episode 1 where the Doctor was using Venusian karate on Stillman, even though this is actually the first time we actually see Venusian karate. But at this point, the Doctor just uses it to temporarily paralyze him. But then, other than that, I get to see more versions of Venusian karate, such as the Doctor just flipping around guys, like going hi, hi, and just doing all that sort of stuff. I mean, it was quite cool as well, and I'm glad we get to see more of this in the John Pertwee era. To the acting and the performances, and I would say that this is definitely the best acted story in this season, and definitely one of the best acted performances in the John Pertwee era. And John Pertwee himself, he was fantastic. I would say that Inferno is definitely one of his best performances as the Doctor. And I really like how he settled in very quickly, and the fact that this is the last episode of season 7, and he's adapted to being the Doctor so quickly, and the whole format changes. It was really good. I mean, I must say, John Pertwee did a very good job when I tip him off for that. And you can really tell that he's settled in very well, because how great season 7 is, and you can tell, and his acting, and obviously the writing in his era. And I like how the Doctor had an amazing role to play in this story, as obviously he sent to the parallel Earth to try and stop the drilling project from happening. And even though it was actually almost completed in that story, but he was just trying to find a way to stop it. But obviously his words fell on deaf ears, and obviously hell was breaking loose. And everyone being cautious of him, and Pineville was running around all over the place, it was still pretty good, and he actually handled his crew quite well, to say the least. And obviously that pretty much made his task a lot more difficult and you can definitely see the desperation in the Doctor's eyes, so he can try and get everyone to listen to him and make everyone see sense for their own sakes. And obviously that didn't happen, and then obviously when the whole drilling project went to shit, and the Doctor realized there's nothing he can do, he has to escape in the TARDIS one way or another, and he was no way impossible that he could have saved the others, and that really distressed the Doctor, to say the least. And I think this is probably the first time ever that the Doctor wasn't able to save someone, and to say the least. And obviously that scene was in episode 6, and I actually mentioned it a couple of times before. When the Doctor was able to escape in the TARDIS, and the alternative universe people that were there, such as Petra, Greg, and Liz, they pretty much had to die, and there was nothing the Doctor that can do. And obviously, if the Doctor was able to control the situation, and if there was a way possible about there being like paradoxes and all that, I think the Doctor would have jumped at the chance to save them, but he obviously couldn't, and that was very sad as well. We also have some funny moments as well, such as obviously that bit in the vortex in episode 1, as I mentioned, and there's another bit I actually found funny when he was showing the TARDIS console to the parallel Earth of Saturn, and Saturn wasn't really impressed, and the Doctor was like, "What did you expect? Some kind of space rocket that Batman at the controls?" It was a very funny line, and I never expected Doctor Who at this point to mention like the mainstream superheroes like Batman and Superman and all that. Even James Bond. I think James Bond does get mentioned later on in this series. Liz Shaw, she was rather good, even though most of the story, Caroline John actually played section leader Elizabeth Shaw in the parallel Earth, and you can actually tell that Caroline John was really having fun making the story, and I think she even said that Inferno was her favourite story that she filmed, and you can definitely see why. Liz Shaw I would say the original Earth of Liz the original Liz back in the original universe was written well, but she doesn't really do much other than run around all over the place trying to get the Doctor, like doing tasks for the Doctor and that. I mean, she doesn't really do much, but it was still quite good, and we don't actually see her. It's like I think it's like 10 minutes into episode one, but she was still good. But this is actually this show's final story, and I'll get more into that later. The Brigadier was quite good in this story. I liked how this. I liked how, despite Stillman's orders for the Doctor's removal, the Brig still insisted that the Doctor remains, even though the Doctor had vanished into an alternative universe. Nicholas Courtney did well as the Brigadier, but he did very well playing the Brigade leader. That's the evil version of the Brigadier, and this is where Nicholas Courtney actually shines. And I probably would say that Inferno is probably the best performance of the Brigadier, or for Nicholas Courtney in Doctor Who ever. I mean, it was quite cool to say the least. And the Brigade leader was an incredible character who's very unique and obviously very different to the Brigadier, and the differences are as clear as day. And obviously, Nicholas Courtney had also had fun making Inferno, and I think he said that this story was also his favourite, so they pretty much made the story great. Benton was good here as well, even though he doesn't actually do much, but even his alternate universe self didn't actually do much as well, but I liked his alternative universe because he was quite brutish compared to the gentle Benton we all know and love. But obviously, alternative Earth Benton gets turned into a Prime Board after coming into contact with that green slime thing, and that started the transformation. And as I mentioned before, that transformation had very good visuals, and I would say John Levine did well for what he was given. So on to the side cast of Inferno, they're all pretty memorable. So if we had, to start off, we had Sir Keith Gold. He was very wary of the Inferno project for that Stillman had planned, and obviously Sir Keith was actually injured in a car accident, so we all thought he died, but he was actually alright. But in the parallel universe, Sir Keith had actually died in a car accident. And I liked his character, it was pretty cool. He also had Greg Sutton. He was an oil drilling expert, and then he was also concerned about the Inferno project. He did have a romantic subplot with Petra, which I did find a bit out of place, but it was still effective to say the least. His alternative universe self was also worried about the project, but this was when Sutton was in prison, and I think his character was in prison for being one of those liberal groups or something like that, but he died along with everyone else in the alternative universe as well. And whilst in the normal universe, Greg pretty much rode off into the sunset with Petra, and that's my next character, Petra Williams. She was Stillman's personal assistant and Greg helped her realize that the Inferno project was actually dangerous, and she aided the Doctor into preventing the Inferno project. And her alternative universe self was also with Stillman, but then she also realized that something else was going on, and obviously in the alternative universe she fell in love with Sutton as well, but unfortunately she dies along with everyone else. I would say she was very well acted and very well written, to say the least, and they were pretty cool. And I think of all the side characters that actually stood out, I'll probably say that it was Greg Sutton that stood out for me. I mean, he was a pretty cool character, even though I was doing a bit of research for this story, for this review. It turned out he was Australian. I didn't hear any bit of Australian in Sutton. It was quite funny, but he is still a very good character. He was quite cool as well, and I liked how he was able to stand up to Stillman at times. It was pretty cool. So on to the villains of Inferno. First off, we have Professor Stillman. He was the founder of the Inferno project, and he actually was the leader of the Inferno project. He actually wanted the project to be done as soon as possible and opposed to anyone that could have caused any delay to the project, such as the Doctor, and he actually was very happy when the Doctor had disappeared. Yeah, and he was a dangerously stubborn man, and he was the main, the unintentional cause of the Doctor being in the parallel universe. And of course we had his alternative Earth counterpart, Director Stillman. He was a lot colder than his original Earth self, and both versions of Stillman actually cared less about the rest of the Inferno project, and they both die in the same way, turning into Prime Wards and getting washed with the fire extinguishers. And obviously Olaf Pooley did well portraying both versions of Stillman, and I actually prefer the parallel Earth Stillman, as he was more intimidating than his ordinary Earth self, as his ordinary Earth self was mainly annoying other than evil, to say the least. And we also have the Prime Wards. They were created as a cause of being exposed to the green substance from the Inferno project drilling, and it first got to a technician called Slocum, and he went and I think he killed another troop as well, and then he started killing other people in the normal universe. But the alternative universe, it started to become a bit more of a major cause and started affecting other characters as well, such as Benton. And they were a good addition to the story. They were there to show how dangerous the Inferno project was and how it really needed to end. Before, this is the last story to feature Liz Shaw as a companion, and this is her final regular appearance in Doctor Who. Inferno wasn't actually intended to be her final story. I think she doesn't even get a departure scene, and it's mentioned in the next story that she went back to Cambridge. So the last we see of Liz was her laughing at the Doctor when the TARDIS console ended up in a nearby rubbish tip after insulting the Brigadier. Yeah, but I think the reason why Caroline John didn't come back for season 8 is because I know she was pregnant shortly after Inferno, but I think she wasn't invited back because the higher ups at the BBC thought that she was too equal to the Doctor. But I'm not entirely too sure of the reason. But if that was one of the main reasons, it's a huge shame because she was a great companion and she was very different to other companions we've actually seen before in Doctor Who. And obviously, she laid the groundwork for having solo companions, and that was pretty cool. But to be fair, I think her departure was a silver lining for Jo Grant to make her debut, because Jo Grant is actually my favorite Doctor companion ever, and if it wasn't for Liz leaving in this story, we probably wouldn't have gotten Jo Grant, to be honest. Now, I don't have any severe issues with Inferno, but I would say that episode 7 does lose the momentum it built during the story, and it kind of does affect that portion. Considering the fact when after the Doctor returned to the normal Earth after the destruction of the parallel universe, he was pretty much unconscious in bed for most of it, for at least a good few minutes. I mean, it's not really a big issue in my eyes, but it does kind of it's a small nitpick I would have with Inferno. But it's not really a big issue because I think it's resolved very well and it gets a very satisfying conclusion. So to conclude this review, Inferno is a remarkable story and is definitely worthy of being one of the greatest Doctor Who stories ever made. So I gave Inferno a perfect 10 out of 10. Woo! So that wraps up my reviews for Season 7. Stay tuned for the ranking of this season. Thanks for watching this review of Inferno. Please let me know your thoughts of this story and this review. And please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Until then, see you later.